The restaurant was one of those expensive steakhouses where the prices aren't listed on the menu and the waiters wear actual tuxedos. My brother Mike had chosen it, which should have been my first warning that something was wrong. Mike never paid for dinner, let alone picked places where appetizers cost $40. "Order anything you want," he said magnanimously, gesturing at the menu. "Tonight's on me. We're celebrating." Across the table my parents beamed at him. My sister Jennifer looked impressed. Even my Uncle Paul, who never approved of anything anyone did, was nodding with something approaching respect. "Celebrating what?" I asked carefully. "You'll see." Mike's smile was wide, confident, the smile of someone who believed they'd done something extraordinarily clever. "Let's eat first. I want to do this properly." I should have left then. Should have recognized the setup, the performance, the carefully orchestrated family dinner that had nothing to do with celebration and everything to do with Mike's ego. But I was tired from a long week, and the thought of going home to my empty apartment and reheated takeout was depressing enough that I stayed. We ordered prime rib for Mike, filet mignon for Dad, salmon for Mom. I chose the cheapest thing on the menu, a chicken dish that still cost $38, and tried to ignore the way Mike smirked at my choice. "Always so cautious," Jennifer said, sipping her expensive wine. "Never taking risks, never splurging. That's your problem, Emma. You're so busy being careful that you forget to actually live." "I live fine," I said quietly. "Do you?" Mom's voice was gentle, but the criticism underneath was clear. "You're 32 years old, honey. You live in that tiny apartment, drive that old car, never go anywhere or do anything. We worry about you." "I'm fine," I repeated. "You're stuck," Mike corrected. "You've been stuck for 5 years. Same boring job, same boring routine, same boring life. Meanwhile, the rest of us are out here making things happen." "Mike just closed a huge real estate deal," Dad said proudly. 3 commercial properties in one transaction. His biggest sale yet. "Congratulations," I said. "Thanks." Mike's smile sharpened. "Though honestly, I couldn't have done it without family support. That's what tonight's about, acknowledging how family helps family succeed." The food arrived. It was excellent, perfectly cooked, beautifully presented. I ate slowly, waiting for whatever Mike had planned. The anticipation felt like waiting for a shoe to drop, like watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. Dessert came. Crème brûlée for everyone except me. I declined, knowing Mike would make some comment about my weight or my frugality. He did anyway. "Emma's always worried about money," he said, cracking the caramelized sugar on his dessert with unnecessary force. "Never wants to spend a dime. Never wants to enjoy life. Just hoards everything in that savings account like some kind of Depression-era grandmother." "There's nothing wrong with being responsible," I said evenly. "Responsible?" He laughed. "Is that what you call having $2.3 million sitting in a savings account earning basically zero interest? Because I'd call that stupid." The table went silent. "How do you know how much I have in my savings account?" I asked, my voice very calm despite the ice flooding my veins. "Because I checked," Mike said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "Had to verify the funds before I could make the transfer." "What transfer?" He unfolded the paper with a flourish, holding it up like a trophy. It was a bank transfer receipt. My bank. My account number. A transfer of $2,287,543.18 to an account in Mike's name. "Finally put your money to good use," he announced, waving the receipt. "You can thank me later." The family applauded. Actual applause, like Mike had just performed a magic trick instead of committing a federal crime. "What did you do?" I asked, still in that unnaturally calm voice I'd learned to use in crisis situations. "I invested your money properly," Mike said proudly. "That commercial real estate deal I mentioned? I used your savings as the down payment. 20% down on a $11.5 million purchase. The returns are going to be incredible. We're talking 15 to 20% annually once the properties are developed." "We?" I repeated. "You and me. Partners." He grinned. 60-40 split. I get 60% since I found the deal and I'm doing all the work, but you get 40% of the profits just for providing the capital. You should be thanking me. In 5 years your $2.3 million will be worth at least $4 million. How did you access my account?" I asked. You left your banking login information on Mom and Dad's computer 3 years ago, he said. Remember when you were paying bills during the holidays and used their laptop? You saved the password. I found it last month when I was helping Dad with something. Figured it was a sign. A sign to steal from me? Not stealing, he corrected, his smile faltering slightly. Investing. For both of us. You're so risk-averse, so scared of everything. I knew you'd never agree to do something smart with that money. So I made an executive decision. As family. To help you. Mike's always looking out for his sister, Mom said warmly. This is wonderful, honey. Finally your money is doing something productive instead of just sitting there. Emma never would have invested it herself, Dad agreed. She's too afraid of losing it. Mike did her a favor. I carefully set down my fork and pulled out my phone. I had 3 missed notifications, all from the last 10 minutes. I opened them. The first was from a number I'd memorized 5 years ago. Transfer detected. Tracking initiated. Stand by. The second was from a different number. Suspect account identified. Funds frozen. The third was from a name I knew very well. Special Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI Cybercrime Unit. 8 minutes. Maintain position. I looked up from my phone to find my entire family staring at me. Everything okay? Jennifer asked. Fine, I said. Just checking something. Probably checking her account balance, Mike laughed. Freaking out that the money's gone. Emma, relax. I'll send you monthly statements. You can track the investment returns. How did you transfer that much money? I asked. Most banks have daily transfer limits. Security holds on large transactions. I spread it out over 3 days, Mike said proudly. Transferred $750,000 each day, then the remainder this morning. Took some planning, but I made it work. You accessed my account multiple times over 3 days. Had to. Like I said, security limits. He was still smiling, still completely oblivious. The bank called once to verify, but I just said I was you. Said I was making an investment. They bought it. You committed bank fraud, I said quietly. I committed smart investing, he corrected. There's a difference. No, I said. There really isn't. Uncle Paul cleared his throat. Emma, I know you're upset, but Mike really did you a favor here. That money was just sitting there. Now it's working for you. That's good financial management. Plus, you get to be part of Mike's success, Jennifer added. His business is taking off. He's going to be a millionaire. And you get to share in that because he was generous enough to include you. Generous, I repeated. Very generous, Mom confirmed. A 60-40 split when he's doing all the work? That's more than fair, Emma. You should be grateful. I checked my phone again. New message, 3 minutes. The thing is, I said conversationally, that account you accessed wasn't actually my personal savings account. Mike's smile dimmed slightly. What do you mean? I mean it's not my money. Of course it's your money. It's in your name. It's in my name, I agreed. But it's not my money. It's evidence. The table went very quiet. Evidence of what? Dad asked slowly. I can't tell you that, I said. It's classified. But I can tell you that the account you just emptied, Mike, is a federal evidence account maintained by the FBI as part of an ongoing cybercrime investigation. I'm the custodian of record because I work for the FBI. That $2.3 million is tagged, tracked, and monitored by the cybercrime unit. Mike had gone pale. You work for the FBI? I'm a senior digital forensics analyst, I said. Have been for 5 years. The boring job, and tiny apartment, are part of my cover. The money in that account is evidence in a major cyber theft case. It was stolen from multiple victims by a criminal organization we've been tracking for 3 years. We recovered it and it's been sitting in that evidence account pending trial and restitution to the victims. You never told us you work for the FBI, Mom said weakly. Because my work is classified, I said. I investigate cybercrimes, money laundering, online fraud networks. Most of my cases involve organized crime syndicates. My real identity, my real life, all of it is protected information. I don't advertise what I do because it could compromise active investigations or put me at risk. So that money, Jennifer trailed off, is federal evidence, I confirmed. Tagged with tracking algorithms. Every movement of those funds is monitored in real time by our systems. The moment Mike initiated the first transfer 3 days ago, alarms went off. The cybercrime unit has been tracking every transaction since then, documenting everything, building a case. A case against who? Mike whispered. Against whoever stole federal evidence, I said. Which would be you. Mike's face had gone from pale to gray. I didn't know. You knew it wasn't your money, I said. You knew you didn't have permission to access my account. You knew you were transferring funds without my authorization. Those facts don't change just because you didn't know the money was federal evidence. But I thought I was helping. You thought you were stealing, I corrected quietly. You found my login information and instead of telling me about the security breach, you used it to access my account multiple times over 3 days, transferring over $2 million to yourself without my knowledge or consent. That's theft, Mike. That's bank fraud. And because the money happens to be federal evidence, it's also obstruction of justice. The restaurant had gone oddly quiet around us. I glanced around and realized why. 4 people in business attire had entered and were positioned near our table. I recognized Rebecca Torres immediately, her FBI credentials already visible on her belt. That's them, she asked me quietly. That's him, I said, gesturing to Mike. Michael Torres, my brother. He initiated the transfers. You called the FBI? Mom's voice was shrill. On your own brother? I didn't call them, I said. I didn't have to. The transfers triggered automatic alerts. The cybercrime unit has been monitoring this since the first transaction 3 days ago. Rebecca stepped forward, her badge now in her hand. Michael Torres? Mike couldn't speak. He just nodded. I'm Special Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI Cybercrime Unit. You're under arrest for theft of federal evidence, bank fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. Stand up, please. Wait, Dad said desperately, standing up. Wait, this is a misunderstanding. He didn't know. Sir, sit down, one of the other agents said firmly. Everyone remained seated except Mr. Torres. Mike stood slowly, his legs shaking. Emma, please. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I didn't mean. You meant to steal $2.3 million, I said. You planned it for days. You executed it deliberately. The only mistake was thinking you could get away with it. Rebecca handcuffed him efficiently. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The restaurant's other patrons were openly staring now. Our family sat frozen, watching as Mike was read his Miranda rights in the middle of an expensive steakhouse. What about the real estate deal? Mike asked desperately as Rebecca began leading him away. I put the money down. It's in escrow. The deal closes next week. The funds have been frozen, Rebecca said. The escrow account has been seized. The deal is void. And the $2.3 million will be returned to FBI custody within 24 hours. But I'll lose the deposit. You'll lose a lot more than that, Rebecca said. You stole federal evidence. You're looking at 10 to 20 years in federal prison. They let him out. The restaurant was completely silent now, everyone watching as my brother was escorted out in handcuffs. I turned back to my family. Mom was crying. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Jennifer and Uncle Paul just stared at me in horror. You let them arrest him, Mom whispered. Your own brother. He stole $2.3 million in federal evidence, I said. What did you think would happen? We thought you'd fix it. Dad shouted. You work for the FBI. You could have stopped this. No, I said calmly. I couldn't. And I wouldn't. Mike committed serious federal crimes. Multiple crimes. He accessed protected systems, stole tagged evidence, committed bank fraud, and attempted to hide the proceeds in a commercial real estate transaction. Those crimes don't disappear just because we share DNA. But he's your brother, Jennifer said. And he's a criminal, I replied. He found my login information and instead of telling me about the security breach, which would have been the right thing to do, he exploited it to steal millions of dollars. He planned this. He executed it over multiple days. He committed deliberate, premeditated crimes. He was trying to help you, Mom sobbed. He was trying to steal from me, I corrected. He just wrapped it in language about investing and family and helping to make himself feel better about it. But the truth is simple. He found access to money that wasn't his and he took it. You could have warned him, Uncle Paul said. You could have told him what that money was before he used it. I couldn't tell him anything, I said. My work is classified. The existence of that account is classified. The investigation it's connected to is classified. I'm legally prohibited from discussing any of it with anyone who doesn't have clearance. Not even family? Especially not family, I said. Because family can be leveraged. Family can be manipulated. Criminal organizations target investigators' families specifically because they know people will compromise their principles to protect loved ones. So you just let him walk into a trap? Dad demanded. Mike walked into a crime, I said. All by himself. Nobody forced him to access my account. Nobody made him transfer the money. Nobody told him to commit fraud. He did all of that on his own because he saw an opportunity and took it. The waiter appeared hesitantly. The check, sir. Dad looked at him blankly. Mike was paying. Mike is in FBI custody, I said. I'll get it. I pulled out my personal credit card and handed it to the waiter. The bill was $847.63. I paid it without flinching, left a generous tip and stood up. Where are you going? Mom asked. Home, I said. I have a long debrief tomorrow. I'll need to document everything that happened tonight for the investigation report. You're just leaving? Jennifer looked stunned. Your brother was just arrested and you're just walking away? Yes, I said simply. Because there's nothing more I can do here. Mike will be processed, arraigned, and assigned a federal public defender. He'll likely be denied bail given the severity of the charges. Then he'll await trial. How long? Dad's voice was hollow. The trial? 6 months to a year probably. Federal cases take time. And prison. If convicted, which he will be, the evidence is overwhelming, he's looking at 10 to 20 years. He'll probably serve 8 to 12 with good behavior. Mom made it sound like a wounded animal. He stole $2.3 million in federal evidence, I said again more gently this time. What did you expect? A slap on the wrist? Fine. These are serious crimes with serious consequences. He's your brother, Mom repeated like it was a magic phrase that could change reality. I know, I said. But that doesn't change what he did. It doesn't change the law. And it doesn't change the consequences. I left them sitting there in the expensive restaurant, surrounded by the remains of the celebration dinner that had turned into a crime scene. The FBI field office was 20 minutes away. I drove there in silence, my mind already shifting into work mode, compartmentalizing the personal from the professional. Rebecca was waiting in the interview room when I arrived. You okay? I'm fine, I said. That was your brother. I know. He studied me for a moment. Most people would be more upset. I'm upset, I said. But I'm also a professional. Mike committed crimes. I did my job. Those two things don't cancel each other out, but they also don't change each other. Fair enough. She slid a tablet across the table. I need your statement. Everything that happened tonight, everything he said. We'll use it in the prosecution. I spent 2 hours documenting everything. Mike's confession about finding my login information. His admission about spreading the transfers over 3 days to avoid security limits. His statement about impersonating me to the bank. His description of the real estate deal. All of it would be used against him. This is a strong case, Rebecca said when I finished. Maybe the strongest slam dunk I've seen in 5 years. Your brother basically confessed to everything in front of 8 witnesses in a public restaurant. He didn't think he was confessing, I said. He thought he was bragging. He genuinely believed he'd done something clever. He did something incredibly stupid, Rebecca corrected. Stealing federal evidence? Accessing FBI systems? That's not clever. That's a one-way ticket to federal prison. I know. Are you going to visit him? I thought about it. Probably not. That's cold. That's honest, I said. Mike has spent our entire lives treating me like I was stupid, worthless, a failure. He mocked my career, my choices, my life. He thought I was pathetic. And then, when he found what he thought was my money, he stole it without a second thought because he believed he deserved it more than I did. So this is revenge? No, I said firmly. This is consequences. If Mike had accessed my account and found it was my personal savings and stolen it, I would have reported him just the same. The fact that it was federal evidence just adds charges. But the fundamental crime, the theft, the fraud, the betrayal, that's what this is about. Rebecca nodded slowly. For what it's worth, you did everything right. You maintained your cover, you didn't interfere with the investigation, you let the system work. That's good protocol. Thanks. Your family won't see it that way. I know, I said. But my family's approval isn't worth compromising my integrity. Over the following weeks, the case proceeded exactly as expected. Mike was arraigned, denied bail, and held in federal custody. His lawyer tried to argue ignorance. He didn't know the money was federal evidence. But it didn't matter. The theft charges alone were enough. My family tried calling me 247 times in the first week. I blocked their numbers after the 15th voicemail, calling me a traitor, a monster, and various creative profanities. Mom sent an email. How can you sleep at night knowing your brother is in prison because of you? We raised you better than this. You've destroyed this family. I didn't respond. Dad's email was shorter. You're not our daughter anymore. Don't contact us again. I wouldn't have anyway. Jennifer's was the most interesting. I hope you're proud of yourself. Mike was trying to help you and you destroyed his life. His kids don't have a father now because you cared more about rules than family. You're heartless. I deleted it without responding. The trial happened 8 months later. I testified for 3 hours, walking the jury through exactly what had happened. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, transfer receipts, security footage, recorded phone calls where Mike had impersonated me to bank officials. And of course 8 witnesses who'd been at that restaurant dinner. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge was not sympathetic. Mr. Torres, you didn't just steal money, she said. You stole federal evidence in an ongoing investigation. You accessed protected systems. You committed bank fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. You did all of this deliberately over multiple days with planning and premeditation. And you did it to your own sister, someone who should have been able to trust you. She sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. My family sent death threats. The FBI investigated, found them credible enough to warrant protective monitoring, and added charges against Uncle Paul for threatening a federal officer. I changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment, and went back to work. 3 years passed. I was promoted to Assistant Section Chief of the Cybercrime Unit. My salary increased to $183,000. I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood outside D.C. I dated occasionally. I made friends with colleagues who understood that sometimes family loyalty has to take a backseat to integrity. I never visited Mike in prison. Never wrote. Never responded to his letters. My parents retired to Arizona and told everyone in their new community that I died in a car accident. It was easier than explaining they had a daughter in the FBI who'd sent their son to prison. Jennifer got married and didn't invite me. I wouldn't have gone anyway. I lived a quiet, successful life. I was good at my job. Really good. I led investigations that dismantled major cybercrime organizations, recovered hundreds of millions in stolen funds, and put dangerous criminals in prison where they belonged. And I never, not once, regretted reporting Mike's crimes. Because some principles are more important than family approval. Things like integrity, justice, the rule of law. Things like knowing that you did the right thing even when it was the hardest thing, even when it cost you your family's love, even when it left you alone. Mike was released after serving 11 years with good behavior. I heard about it through law enforcement channels, not through family. He never contacted me. My parents passed away within 2 years of each other. I found out when their estate lawyer tracked me down. They'd left everything to Jennifer in their will with a specific clause excluding me. Our daughter Emma is not to receive any portion of this estate as she has proven herself to be without loyalty, compassion, or family values. I had the lawyer send me a copy of the clause. I framed it and hung it in my home office. Because family values, I'd learned, shouldn't include accepting crime. Shouldn't include protecting criminals. Shouldn't include compromising your principles because someone shares your DNA. Real family values mean integrity, honesty, accountability. Real family values mean doing the right thing even when it's hard. Even when it costs you everything. even when you end up alone. I was 45 years old when Mike finally reached out. A letter forwarded through official channels because he didn't have my address. It was short. Emma, I don't expect you to read this or respond. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. Prison gave me a lot of time to think. A lot of time to realize what I did. Not just the theft, though that was bad enough, but everything before it. The way I treated you. The way I dismissed you. The way I saw you as less than, as someone whose success was something to resent instead of celebrate. You were right. About all of it. I stole from you because I thought I deserved your money more than you did. I thought I was smarter, more ambitious, more worthy. I thought you were weak. But you were never weak. You were principled. You had integrity. You knew who you were and you never compromised that, not even for family. I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I destroyed my own life through my own choices. The fact that those choices hurt you doesn't make them your fault. It makes them mine. I just wanted you to know. You were right to report me. You were right to testify. You were right to let the system work. And I'm sorry. For everything. Mike. I read the letter once, then filed it away. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday we'd rebuild some kind of relationship. Or maybe not. Either way, I was fine. I had my career. My house. My principles. My integrity. I had the knowledge that I'd done the right thing even when it cost me everything. And honestly, that was worth more than any family's approval could ever be.
Do you truly believe there's a place for you here? My mother-in-law's words sliced through the air as we sat in the restaurant, the aroma of the lavish meal before us tainted by her disdain. You're just a daughter-in-law, not blood, she added, a smirk playing on her lips. Her hand waved dismissively, a gesture that felt like an invitation to leave. Anger coursed through me, making my hands tremble as I pushed back my chair to stand. But before I could exit the room, she halted me with a raised hand. Wait. What about the bill? If you're leaving early, leave the money, she demanded, a smug expression on her face. I met her gaze with a defiant smile. Why would I pay for a stranger's bill? I retorted, my name is Maya, a 29-year-old office worker. My husband Tyrell and I were content in our relationship, except for one persistent problem, my overbearing mother-in-law. Living in close proximity to her, she invaded our lives, criticizing my cooking and homemaking skills. Uninvited, she'd barge in, pointing out every flaw, all while pretending to be a concerned mother. When I complained to Tyrell, he didn't believe me. In his eyes, his mother was just a loving parent, blind to her manipulations. As time passed, her intrusions grew worse. Armed with a key my husband had given her, she'd enter our home, criticizing and complaining about everything. She even tarnished my reputation with the neighbors, spreading lies about me. I pleaded with Tyrell to move away, but he remained indifferent, busy with work. Then, a turning point arrived. His successful project led to a promotion and a significant salary increase. Seizing the opportunity, I suggested expanding our family. Now that our income has grown, perhaps it's time to think about having children. I proposed, hoping that this positive change might finally open his eyes to the toxic presence of his mother. I thought it was a good idea, but if we're considering having children, I prefer to live in a more child-friendly town. There are very few child care centers here, and there are no parks for children to play in. Isn't it time for us to move? Finally, my husband gave a positive response about moving, and I was happier about this than the news of his promotion. However, that feeling didn't last long. The next day, my mother-in-law came over as usual without any notice. I was fed up, assuming she had come to nag again. But something seemed different this time. I've decided to celebrate my son's promotion, so I've reserved a restaurant. It's a very expensive place, but it's elegant. The food is top-notch, and the staff's attitude is wonderful. It has a great word-of-mouth reputation, she said, inviting me to join. That's nice. Good for you, I replied, trying to be polite, although I was as unfriendly as ever. Well, never mind. I want you to come to this restaurant too. Please come. I'll check my schedule, but it's probably impossible, I added. Don't say that. We'll be waiting for you, she insisted. Even though I answered that way, she just smirked and left. Until now, she had been excluding me, but now she was inviting me and saying she'd wait. There must be something going on. When I asked my husband when he got home, he said he had already told his mother that we would go together. She had reserved that restaurant for us, and he was looking forward to it. You feel the same way, don't you, Maya? He asked. Sorry, but I'm not looking forward to it. I don't know how much money it will cost at such an expensive place. I don't want to go. Just say I have urgent business and enjoy yourself. I replied, feeling apprehensive about the situation. Why are you thinking so negatively? Besides, it's not just us going to the restaurant. My brothers are bringing their wives too. It would be bad if you didn't come with the whole family, my husband insisted, excited about going to a fancy restaurant for the first time. Even though I didn't want to, I felt compelled to comply. My words no longer reached my husband. If he believed my mother-in-law more than me, I decided to record her harassment with a voice recorder I bought online. She was probably planning to harass me at the celebration too. I would record her voice and play it for my husband. If he still defended her, I would divorce him. With that decision, I felt a bit better. Still, the day to meet my mother-in-law at the restaurant was depressing, and I kept sighing. I hardly knew my husband's brothers, having only met them at the wedding, and I had no memory of talking to their wives beyond greetings. When we arrived at the restaurant, the waiter led us to a large room where my mother-in-law, the other son, and his wife, and the third son and his wife were already seated. The lavish spread was already adorning the table, with just one vacant seat. My husband, puzzled, tilted his head in confusion. Did the waiter make a mistake with the number of suits? He wondered aloud. I'll go ask. Everyone start eating, he said, leaving the room. The moment he stepped out, my mother-in-law stood up, her expression twisted into a sneer. There's no seat for you. Why should I invite a stranger who just married my son to a family celebration? She said, her tone dripping with disdain. So I'll give you a choice. Show your sincerity and be accepted as family, or leave and never show your face to me again. Choose now. I'm leaving, I answered without hesitation. Mother-in-law was momentarily flustered. Did she think I would beg her to recognize me as family in this situation? No way. Listen to the end. If you pay the entire bill here, I'll recognize you as Terrell's wife. You must be frustrated being treated as a stranger, so pay up and become family, she demanded. I told you I'm leaving. Why should I pay for someone else's family's bill? I retorted, turning my back on her. Mother-in-law slammed the table and shouted, Don't you get it? I'm offering to make you family. Are you okay with being a stranger? Pay up. No, I'm fine being a stranger. Since I'm a stranger, I won't pay for your meal. Goodbye. Mother-in-law chased after me, but by the time she reached the entrance of the room from the farthest seat, I was already at the exit of the restaurant. When I got home, thinking I'd email my husband, he returned within 10 minutes. The waiter said the reservation number wasn't wrong, and my mom was causing a scene. I heard the situation from my brother. I'm sorry for making you feel bad. You managed to come back quickly, he said. It seemed like my declaration that I was fine being a stranger had also stirred something in the eldest son's wife and the third son's wife. They had previously thought enduring harassment silently was the only option, but seeing me talk back made them realize they could do it too. In their momentum, both of them left, and their husbands, the eldest and third sons, hurriedly followed suit. I had braced myself for complaints from my mother-in-law, and sure enough, within 3 hours, the phone started ringing incessantly. It was so disruptive that I eventually blocked the calls. However, one call managed to get through from an unknown number. Hello, sorry for calling so late. Is this Maya's mobile phone? The man on the other end identified himself as a police officer from the nearby police station. He informed me that after being left alone, my mother-in-law had tried to eat what she could and subsequently attempted to make me foot the bill later on. However, the restaurant staff, already disapproving of my mother-in-law after the earlier disturbance, declined her request. They believed I wouldn't return to pay after leaving in anger. Ignoring all her calls, my mother-in-law was then suggested to pay by card, but she lacked a credit card and hadn't brought enough cash to cover everyone's meals. In a desperate bid, she tried contacting other family members to cover the costs, but no one responded. Frustrated and cornered, she started yelling, blaming me entirely for the situation. Her anger escalated, leading to a scene where she damaged expensive vases and flower pots at the restaurant. This chaos prompted the restaurant to call the police. The responding officers managed to calm down my furious mother-in-law, but she adamantly refused to accept any wrongdoing. The restaurant, not only unpaid but also burdened with a troublesome customer, sought help to escort her home. Feeling guilty about ignoring a call from the police, my husband and I reluctantly returned to the restaurant. Upon our arrival, my mother-in-law was being pacified by the police. The moment she spotted me, she raised her eyes and, crossing her arms, screamed, "You good for nothing. This situation happened because you didn't pay the bill. It's natural to help your mother, isn't it? Pay up now." I was utterly astonished when my mother-in-law uttered something almost threatening, even with the police present. They had clearly stated that if no one took her home, they would either escort her to her in-laws' house in a patrol car or arrest her for dining and dashing. "Please take her away, arrest her, or whatever it takes, just make her take responsibility," I said, my voice cold and resolute. Mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock at my words. "How can you say something so cold? I can't believe it. Just pay up. It's bad luck to have a family member arrested," she pleaded. "I don't care. I'm not family, and I don't want to get close to someone who's talking crazy and causing a scene," I replied, attempting to leave the restaurant and let the police handle the situation. However, my husband, who had remained silent all along, glared at me. I understand that what was said and done to Maya was terrible. But is it something bad enough to be arrested for? He questioned, defending his mother. "You're missing the point. She's in trouble with the police because she dined and dashed and caused a scene at the restaurant. I have nothing to do with it. Or are you saying that I'm the one at fault for not paying for 6 people's meals, even though I didn't eat?" I retorted. My husband fell silent but walked past me toward the police and the restaurant staff. I knew what he intended to do. Anticipating his actions, I called out to his retreating back. "If you're going to pay for her meal and compensate them, we're getting divorced. Think about that." My husband didn't respond to my words and silently took out his wallet. I sighed and left the restaurant. Walking the familiar road back home, I started packing my essential belongings, preparing to leave. Just before the date changed, my husband finally returned. "Mom's not getting arrested. It seems she was really in the wrong. But the restaurant said they'd forgive her if I compensated them and promised she'd never come back. I didn't have nearly enough money, so I had my brothers come and help." "Oh, I'm so tired," he explained, his voice weary. He continued rambling about what happened after I left, seemingly annoyed by my lack of reaction. Then he approached me, noticing my packed bags. "Hey, what's with these bags?" he asked, puzzled. "I'm preparing to leave the house because we're getting divorced. I told you that if you defended her, we'd get divorced. You're not going to say you didn't hear me, are you?" I replied firmly. My husband looked down at me, his eyes wide with astonishment. Then he raised his gaze and began to yell. "What's going on today? You've been acting strange all day. I understand that Mom did something terrible, but why do we have to get divorced? I've told you I'm being harassed, and even with evidence and other people's testimony, you still choose your mother, who was almost arrested, over me. Is it strange that I want to divorce someone like that? I've had enough." My husband continued to say various things, but it all went in one ear and out the other. I prepared to leave the house and made preparations for divorce. The next morning, I immediately went to get the divorce papers. When I signed and handed them to my husband, he made a big fuss about not wanting to divorce. However, when I mentioned involving a lawyer, he reluctantly signed, and I submitted the papers right away. Finally, I was able to return to being a stranger. Afterward, my husband moved out of the house and went to live with his parents. Apparently, he had relied on me for most of the housework, so he couldn't manage it himself. As a result, the house became a mess. Disliking the dirty house, he canceled the apartment lease and decided to return to his parents' home. Additionally, the eldest and third sons faced similar outcomes. On the day when my husband called his brothers to help with the compensation, they each had a big fight with their wives. The wives protested that they didn't want to pay for something that was their mother's fault, but the brothers used their savings to assist their mother without consulting them. Moreover, the brothers believed mother-in-law's words, thinking they might get arrested because of their unreasonable wives. Their love cooled at the sight of them belittling me, and they were immediately confronted with the prospect of divorce. Both of them returned to their parents' homes, refusing to do housework. In the end, mother-in-law and her 3 childlike brothers also returned to the in-laws' house. Thanks to this situation, they became a subject of mockery among the neighbors, who spread the word that all the brothers were abandoned by their wives. Mother-in-law dismissed these rumors as nonsense, passionately defending her sons and blaming us wives for their failures. The husbands, hearing the story, smugly nodded, convinced that divorcing them was the right decision. However, my relationship with the neighbors remained decent, and nobody believed these tales. They were aware of mother-in-law's nasty personality and kept their distance, quietly laughing at her. Mother-in-law became known as a failed mother who couldn't educate her sons, while the husbands gained a reputation in the neighborhood as mama's boys who defended their mother instead of protecting their wives. Despite the furious attempts of mother-in-law and the husbands to contact me, I had changed all my contact information and moved to a new house. In the end, they couldn't find us, and they live their lives constantly complaining. Since I'm no longer involved with mother-in-law and the others, my days have become enjoyable. Being free from the stress of dealing with her is a significant relief, and making new friends has also been wonderful. In fact, during the divorce process, I bonded with the ex-wives of the eldest and third sons over our shared grievances about mother-in-law. Now, we often go out for meals and enjoy shopping on weekends. In giving me such wonderful friends, I might even have to thank my ex-husband. The day after tomorrow, we're all planning to visit a new cafe. From now on, we can do what we want. It might sound obvious, but it feels more liberating than ever before. I want to lead my own life without getting involved with such toxic people, and I am genuinely grateful for the friendships I've found. I believe I would still be living alone if it weren't for them. The reason I'm not lonely now and the reason I can live happily is all thanks to them. I'm truly thankful, and I hope this relationship continues forever.
The Anderson family Christmas party always smelled like cinnamon and condescension. I stood in the corner of my uncle's oversized living room, nursing a glass of wine that probably cost more than what he thought I made in a week, watching the usual drama unfold. "So, Olivia," Uncle Jack's voice boomed across the room, drawing everyone's attention just the way he liked it. "Still running that little boutique of yours. What do you call it again? The Fashion? Something? Empress Collective." I replied calmly, though my grip on the wine glass tightened slightly. "And yes, it's doing quite well, actually. We've expanded to 3 locations this year." He laughed, that particular laugh he reserved for when he wanted to make someone feel small. "That's cute. You know, if you ever want to learn about real business, you should come shadow me at Anderson Technologies for a day. Show you how the big boys play." My cousin Marcus, Jack's son and heir apparent, snickered from his position by the fireplace. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first month's rent, but somehow still managed to look like a boy playing dress-up. "I appreciate the offer," I said, taking another sip of wine, "but I'm actually quite busy with my own ventures." "Ventures?" Uncle Jack's eyebrows shot up. "Selling dresses isn't exactly what I'd call a venture, sweetheart. Now, take what we're doing at Anderson Tech. We just closed a deal with Microdyne Systems. That's real business." I noticed my father shift uncomfortably in his seat. He'd worked under his older brother Jack at Anderson Technologies for 30 years, always one step below the top, always almost but not quite good enough. The company had been started by our grandfather, but somehow Jack had maneuvered his way into controlling everything by the time he was 40. "The Microdyne deal," I said thoughtfully. "That's the one where you're supplying their new manufacturing line with processing chips, right?" Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. "Been reading the business pages, have we?" "Something like that." What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been doing a lot more than reading. The little boutique was just the visible tip of a very large, very carefully constructed iceberg. While they were all busy underestimating me, I'd built something they couldn't even imagine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another update from my real office. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, leaving behind the sound of Jack launching into another story about his latest business triumph. The message was from Sarah, my COO. "Sterling acquisition is complete. We're ready to announce whenever you give the word." I smiled, thinking about what was coming. Sterling Industries was Microdyne's primary chip supplier, or at least, They had been until about 20 minutes ago. Now they belonged to Nova Technologies, my company. The company nobody in my family knew existed, because I'd built it under my mother's maiden name, Matthews. I walked back into the living room just in time to hear Uncle Jack holding court about women in business. "Look," he was saying, gesturing with his whiskey glass. "I'm not saying women can't work, but certain industries require a particular kind of thinking, strategy, aggression. It's just biology." "Really?" My cousin Jessica, Jack's daughter, sat silently beside him. She had an MBA from Harvard and had been trying to get a management position at Anderson Technologies for 2 years. Jack kept finding reasons why she wasn't ready. "Speaking of strategy," I said, unable to help myself, "what's your contingency plan if Sterling Industries changes their supply terms?" The room got quiet. Jack stared at me like I'd just spoken in tongues. "Sterling? They're locked into a 10-year contract with Microdyne. Besides, they're family-owned old school. They don't make waves." I checked my watch. Interesting perspective. Just then, Jack's phone rang. Then Marcus's. Then half the phones in the room started buzzing. I watched as Jack's face went from annoyed to confused to something approaching panic as he read whatever was on his screen. This has to be a mistake," he muttered, scrolling frantically. "Sterling just announced they're under new ownership. Some company called Nova. But that's impossible. I was just golfing with their CEO last week." "Nova Technologies," I said clearly, causing every head in the room to turn toward me. "Founded 5 years ago, specializing in next-generation processing solutions and strategic acquisitions." Jack's face started to redden. "How do you—" I pulled up the Wall Street Journal app on my phone and held it out to him. There it was, in bold headlines. "Nova Technologies acquires Sterling Industries in surprise move. CEO Elizabeth Matthews signals aggressive expansion plans." "Elizabeth Matthews," I said quietly, "is my mother's maiden name. And Nova Technologies is my company. You know, the one I built while you were all so busy laughing at my little boutique." The silence in the room was absolute. I could practically hear their minds racing, recalculating every interaction we'd had over the past 5 years. That's not possible," Marcus sputtered. "You sell clothes." "I do," I agreed. "The boutiques are quite profitable, actually, but they're also excellent places to meet people. CEOs' wives, board members' daughters. You'd be amazed what people talk about while trying on designer dresses." I turned to Uncle Jack, who looked like he might actually pass out. "By the way, about that Microdyne deal, you might want to call them. Since Nova now controls their chip supply, I imagine they'll be interested in renegotiating terms." "You can't," Jack started, but his phone rang again. The caller ID read, "Microdyne CEO." I gathered my coat and bag, ready to leave. But first, I turned to Jessica. "I'm expanding my executive team at Nova. If you're interested in a job where your Harvard MBA actually gets put to use, call me Monday." As I walked toward the door, I heard Uncle Jack's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it before. "Olivia, wait." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "Sorry, Uncle Jack. I'd love to stay and chat, but I have a merger to manage. You know how it is, real business for real players." The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, leaving behind a room full of people who were just beginning to realize that while they'd been dismissing me, I'd been building an empire. And this was just the beginning. Monday morning arrived with the kind of chaos I'd carefully orchestrated. My phone had 47 missed calls, mostly from family members who suddenly wanted to catch up. I sat in my real office, the one none of them had ever seen, on the 45th floor of downtown's most prestigious building, watching the sunrise paint the city skyline in shades of gold. "Ms. Matthews?" My assistant Michael appeared at the door. "Microdean's executives are in the main conference room. And your uncle's been in the lobby for an hour." I smiled, checking my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sharp black suit, not a hair out of place. Power, but subtle. Let's not keep them waiting. The conference room fell silent as I entered. 5 men in expensive suits sat around the mahogany table, including Thomas Chen, Microdean's CEO. Uncle Jack wasn't among them. He was still downstairs, probably fuming that his name couldn't get him past security. "Gentlemen," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table, "I believe we have some contracts to discuss." Thomas Chen cleared his throat. "Ms. Matthews, or should I say Ms. Anderson, this is unexpected." "Elizabeth Matthews is fine," I replied smoothly. "Now about Anderson Technologies' chip supply agreement. I've reviewed the terms. They're significantly below market rate." "We have a binding contract," one of their lawyers interjected. "With Sterling Industries," I corrected. "Sterling is now Nova Technologies, and while we'll honor existing agreements, any renewal will be at current market rates, plus a 20% premium for historical undervaluation." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "That would significantly impact our bottom line." "True," I agreed. "However, Nova can offer something Anderson Technologies can't. Next-generation processing capability. Our R&D division has developed chips that are 40% more efficient. We've kept that quiet until now." I slid folders across the table to each of them. Inside were the specs that made their eyes widen. 5 years of secret development, funded by the profits from my little boutiques, and some very strategic early investments. "This is," Thomas started. "Revolutionary," I finished, "and exclusive to Nova's direct partners. So, gentlemen, shall we discuss new terms?" 2 hours later, I had signed a deal that would effectively end Anderson Technologies' main revenue stream within 6 months. As the executives filed out, Thomas lingered. "You know," he said quietly, "your uncle tried to convince me you were some sort of corporate raider. Said you had no real business experience." I raised an eyebrow. "And I just watched you command a room of seasoned executives like you've been doing it for decades. Whatever else you are, Ms. Matthews, you're clearly your grandfather's heir in ways that have nothing to do with the family name." After they left, I finally called security to send Uncle Jack up. He burst into my office like a storm cloud in an Italian suit. "How dare you?" he started. "You manipulative little—" "Careful, Uncle Jack," I cut him off. "You're in my building now, and I don't tolerate that kind of language in my workplace." He deflated slightly, looking around my office, twice the size of his, with better views and modern art pieces worth more than his car. "How?" he asked finally. "How did you do this without any of us knowing?" "I learned from you, actually," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. "All those years watching you manipulate and maneuver, thinking no one noticed. I noticed everything. I just had a different plan." The boutiques were perfect cover and surprisingly profitable. It turns out when you treat people with respect and actually listen to them, they become incredibly loyal customers and investors. His face darkened. "You're trying to destroy me." "No, Uncle Jack. I'm trying to build something better. You spent years telling me and Jessica and every other woman in the family that we weren't cut out for real business. I spent those same years proving you wrong. The Microdine contract is being renegotiated as we speak. They're moving all their chip supply to Nova. You might want to warn your shareholders. He slumped in his chair, suddenly looking older. What do you want? Want? I smiled. I want you to go back to the office and explain to your board why you never saw this coming. I want you to tell Jessica why you really kept her out of management. I want you to experience what it feels like to be underestimated and dismissed. I'll fight this, he threatened weakly. You can try. But first, you might want to look into who's been quietly buying Anderson Technologies stock over the past 3 years. Here's a hint. Check under the name Matthews Investment Group. His face went pale. How much? 28%. Not enough for control, but enough to make the next shareholders' meeting very interesting. A knock at my door interrupted us. Jessica walked in, looking professional and determined in a suit that actually fit her role. Sorry I'm late, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic was terrible. Late? Jack looked between us, realization dawning. Yes, I said. Jessica starts today as Nova's new Chief Strategy Officer. Her Harvard MBA will be put to good use here. You can't just take my daughter. She's not yours to keep or take. I cut him off. She's a brilliant executive who deserves a chance to prove it. Unlike you, I believe in promoting people based on talent, not gender. Jessica placed a folder on my desk. The preliminary audit of Anderson Technologies' project management systems as requested. There are significant irregularities. Jack stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. This is betrayal. No, Jessica said firmly. This is business. Isn't that what you always taught us? I watched my uncle storm out, knowing this was just the beginning. The real battle would come at the shareholders' meeting next month. But I was ready. I'd been ready for years. Well, Jessica said after he left, that was dramatic. Welcome to real business, I replied with a smile. Now let's talk about Phase 2. Because while they thought the Sterling acquisition was my endgame, it was really just my opening move. I had 5 years of careful planning to unveil, and a family empire to rebuild, this time with a very different kind of leadership. The game was just beginning. The Anderson Technologies shareholders meeting was held in the same hotel ballroom where, 15 years ago, I'd watched my grandfather hand control of the company to Uncle Jack instead of my father. I remembered sitting in the back row, barely out of college, watching my father's face as his older brother took everything he'd worked for. Today, I sat in the front row. The tension in the room was palpable. News of the Microdine contract loss had hit hard. Anderson Technologies stock had dropped 30% in 2 weeks. The shareholders were out for blood, and Uncle Jack was sweating on the stage. As you can see from our projections, he was saying, his voice lacking its usual confidence, we have several promising alternatives in development. What about Nova Technologies? Someone called out. Is it true they now control our entire supply chain? Jack's eyes found mine in the crowd. I smiled pleasantly. We are in negotiations with Nova, he managed. Is it also true that Nova's CEO is your niece? Another shareholder demanded. The same niece you repeatedly denied a position on the board? Before he could answer, the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. My father walked in, followed by a team of lawyers. Right on schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, my father announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. I have here documents that should interest all of you. He began distributing folders to the board members. I watched Jack's face as he opened his copy, saw the moment he realized what he was reading. These records show systematic discrimination in hiring and promotion practices, my father continued. They also show irregular accounting of project funds over the past decade, all approved by our current CEO. The room erupted in chaos. Board members were flipping through pages. Shareholders were shouting questions. Through it all, I remained seated, calm and composed. "This is a trick," Jack shouted over the noise. "A conspiracy between my brother and my niece too." "To what, Uncle Jack?" I stood finally, walking toward the stage. "To expose the truth. To show how you've been running this company like your personal kingdom." I took the microphone from him. The room quieted. "My name is Olivia Anderson, though some of you may know me as Elizabeth Matthews, CEO of Nova Technologies. 15 years ago, I sat in this room and watched my grandfather's legacy being twisted into something he never intended. Today, I'm here to restore it." I nodded to my lawyers, who began distributing another set of documents. "What you're receiving now is a proposal. Nova Technologies is offering to merge with Anderson Technologies. A full restructuring, new management, and immediate implementation of the next-generation processing technology that Microdyne has already signed on for." The room buzzed with excitement. These were business people, after all. They could see the potential. This merger would not only save the company but position it as a market leader in tech innovation. The Anderson name would remain, but the company culture would change. No more discrimination. No more nepotism. No more old boys club. "You can't do this," Jack sputtered. "The board would never." Actually, one of the board members stood up. "Given these revelations and the company's current position, we're obligated to consider any offer that could protect shareholder value." "And with Matthews Investment Group's 28% stake," another added, "combined with the proxy votes Ms. Anderson has already secured, I believe she has the numbers." I turned to face my uncle directly. "You told me to stick to my little shop. That real business was for men." "Well, Uncle Jack, this is real business, and you've just been outmaneuvered by a girl who sells dresses." The vote was almost unanimous. By the end of the day, I was standing in my grandfather's old office, now my office, looking out over the city. The portrait of him still hung on the wall, his kind eyes seeming to twinkle with approval. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Jessica, carrying a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "So," she said, pouring the drinks, "CEO of both Nova and Anderson Technologies. Not bad for someone who was supposed to stick to retail." I laughed, taking a glass. "How's your father taking it?" "He's adjusting. The board's severance package helped soften the blow, though I think his ego took a hit when they named me Chief Operating Officer." "You earned it," I said firmly. "And not because you're his daughter or my cousin, because you're brilliant at what you do." We clinked glasses and looked out at the sunset painting the sky in shades of victory. "You know," Jessica said thoughtfully, "I kept wondering all these years why you never fought back when they dismissed you. Now I understand. You were playing the long game." "I learned something important running those boutiques," I replied. "Success isn't always about being the loudest or most aggressive. Sometimes it's about being patient, observant, and building something so solid they can't ignore it when you finally reveal it." My phone buzzed. Another message from Thomas at Microdyne, confirming our expanded partnership. On my desk, the Wall Street Journal's headline read, Nova-Anderson merger reshapes tech landscape. Elizabeth Matthews makes history. To the future of Anderson Technologies, Jessica raised her glass. To doing business our way, I corrected. Later that night, I visited my grandfather's grave. I placed a copy of the merger announcement against his headstone. You always said the company needed new blood, I whispered. I hope this is what you meant. As I drove home, I thought about the little girl who used to sit in board meetings, taking notes while everyone ignored her. The young woman who opened a little boutique while secretly building an empire. The CEO who finally showed them all what real business looks like. Uncle Jack had been right about one thing. Business was about strategy and aggression. He just never realized that sometimes the most aggressive move is the one your opponent never sees coming. And as for that little shop, I kept it running, a reminder of where it all started. Because sometimes the biggest victories come disguised as small beginnings.